Hi, my name is Wayne, and this is Type Tested. Typewriter I'm working on today is this wonderful early Underwood 3-bank. Now you can tell that it's early because it has a much more flatter basket, whereas later ones have the more traditional U-shape. Now this particular typewriter is interesting because it has the triple duty on the type bars. So each one has 3 characters on it, just like the Corona 3 I was working on not too long ago. So you have the lowercase, you have the uppercase, which you'll notice this is a carriage shift, and then you have a figure shift. So the figures are the various glyphs. So you see, here's the percent, there's the ampersand, there's the dollar. Hit the shift, the figure shift to go to those. Now this one does have a lock, and that is this little button right here. And that's one of the things that tends to get out of adjustment. It's a little bit tricky to fix, so I'm not going to go over it today. What I'm interested in today is a fairly simple problem, and this will happen. As I'm typing along, I come to the end of the line. The carriage stops, but the line lock doesn't engage. But if I give it a little bump, it does engage. However, push it back, and it doesn't disengage until you get all the way to the other margin. Now that is a little bit of a problem, as you can imagine. So let me show you how this works. So what we have, as I type, the key levers push this down. So this would be the escapement trip. So I guess you could call this the universal bar because it doesn't have anything behind the basket as later typewriters do. So as I type, that moves. And then when I get to the end of the line, this is supposed to come up and block the trip. Now if I give the carriage a little bit of a bump, you can see that that does indeed happen. Now I need to adjust that a little bit because it's not going quite as far as it ought to, but it does block the escapement. The problem is when I pull it back, this is supposed to release and it's not doing so. Now this is obviously not the original spring. It's a modified replacement, kind of not exactly well done, but it's sufficient. It does the job. When I pull it all the way back to the other end of the carriage, now you can see that it did drop, and I can type again. Now the reason this is having a problem is because of the way that the carriage lock, the line lock works. So as I go to the end of the line, what happens is this here will push up against this here and trigger the line lock, but it's not until I give it a shove. Now if you'll note right here, when I do that, the margin bar moves, and now the line lock's engaged. When I pull it back, the margin bar does not move until I get to the other margin stop, and this surface here grabs that surface and pushes it back. So this is what's key, and ironically this also holds the bell. So this is not the problem though. The problem is here. So if you note, let me zoom in a little bit so you can see, there's a little bit of back and forth movement over here. But if I go over here, there is no back and forth movement. This is binding, and that is the problem. Now, the margin bar, remember, is attached to the line lock, and that line lock has a spring attached to it. So that spring is what should be pulling this back in place. So if I turn this around again, move the camera, you can see that there's a screw there. So the question is, what do I need to do to secure this but also keep it free? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen this just ever so slightly, if I can. Move this aside so I can get in here without disturbing the camera. So if I move it aside, if I loosen it just a little bit, then I start to get more free movement. So now, if I get to the end, the line lock engages, but it's still not disengaging. So let's see. Loosen this a little bit more. And right now, I'm just trying to get it to the point where it will actually work, and then I'll figure out the specifics a little bit later. Try loosening this other side just a hair. Now if you'll note, as I push the other side here, it is starting to spring back. So that means that I should now but I'm still not moving with enough force. So that could be that the mainspring isn't quite wound enough. However, once the line lock engages and I push back, it's now disengaging. So let me look at the mainspring here. And this can be wound using this here. So what I have to do is I have to hold the cylinder, so otherwise it'll unwind and that'll be a problem. I have to loosen this, and then I have to wind this here, and then push this back up so that it catches that gear. So I'm going to do that a little bit more. So there's no spring on this, so this is kind of difficult. And then to be safe, you need to tighten that down. So with a little bit more spring tension, let's see what happens here. And that made the difference. So now, what I will do, let me tighten this side back down because it seemed to be right. Yeah, maybe not quite that much. And now, as you can see from this side, he's moving quite well. Let's see if I can tighten this down a bit and have it still move correctly. All right. So what I'm going to do is so here's that screw there. I am going to get some thread glue, and I'm going to put it on each of these screws to keep them from coming out. And that, in combination with the stiffer mainspring, should address all of the relevant issues with the line lock. This should no longer be dependent on where the carriage is when it releases. So let me backspace. And everything works effectively and reliably. So, tension on this bar was the big problem in this, along with a slightly underwound mainspring. And this mainspring, you'll note I had to replace the drawstring on this when it broke. Now, that itself is a little bit of a tricky process. I'm not going to get into that. It's not held on the traditional way. Anyway, so slightly different mainspring, more room to move on the margin bar, and everything works correctly. So, fixing the margin system on an Underwood 3-bank portable. It's going to be a nice little typewriter when I get done with it. Once again, my name is Wayne, and this is Type Tested.